Hello, my name is Darren Roy, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Scenes with Darren Roy. Today we have the privilege of being with Jeremy Woodward.
Thank you so much for having me on
No.
the show today. This is a total honor, and I'm super happy to be here today.
Thank you. So as like a lot of the guests that I have, as people I've known for a while and people that I've hung out with, and like you, you're a very interesting person to me because we kind of share a lot of the same things. But you've also like kind of done a little bit of everything. So I think that's going to be cool about today's episodes. We're going to kind of go a couple different avenues, but it'll all come back to the same thing. So I guess let's start off with what we have in common. We both have artificial valves, which is crazy to me because I've gone 31 years without knowing anybody that really had one. Mm-hmm. And then I meet you, and you're like, yeah, dude, like I have the same thing.
Yeah, and I think it was by chance that we got talking about it, and then both of us realized that we each have artificial valves. Yours is a mitral valve.
Right.
I have an artificial aortic heart valve. So it is pretty cool. It's neat to be in company with somebody else because if you have never experienced it, you don't have it, it's hard for people to understand what it really means.
Sure, because it's one of those things where it's not, it's not visible. You can't, you wouldn't know unless we told you, or we talked about it, or people don't know unless you talk about it, right? So I feel like that's kind of like one of the cool things, to really talk about today. And you're a very active person now, with the physical things that you do, and I think it's kind of cool that like, hey, like I have this heart issue. Mm-hmm. But like that hasn't stopped me, it hasn't stopped you from doing what you love. Let's go back to when you were a kid because we probably had the same things. Once you realized you had it, was life different for you as a kid? Did you feel like you couldn't do what other kids did, like let's say on the playground or physically? Things like that?
Yeah, no, great questions. So when I was, I think it was about 3 or 4 years old, my pediatrician detected a heart murmur. It's actually, from what I understand, quite common, in young kids. And they had told my family that if I had any issues, it would either be at that point in my life or I will notice at some point later in my life. And when I notice it, I'll notice it. Like something, it'll be under, a dire circumstance. So, I grew up pretty normal, but it's funny though, because when I do look back on certain things, I struggled with certain things. And then when I piece it all together, I think some of the things that I struggled with, it all relates back to having a heart that was not working the way that it should be, or, the way that it should have been working. So, there was really nothing other than, when I was younger, I had to pre-medicate before dental appointments. That was the only thing that for me that really made me think about it. I never, ever had any issues where I was like, oh, I have a heart, nothing.
Yeah.
Ever.
Well, so it was funny because my mom would always be like, no physical sports, no physical contact. And then now, like, looking back as an adult, I'm like, I roughhouse with people all the time. And like, so I wonder if it was like a abundance of caution, just to protect, obviously, because the heart is your most important thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, we kind of had the similar, the similar lifestyle. Obviously the surgeries aren't fun. That's that's the biggest thing. Not so much of the surgery, but so much of the downtime that comes after it.
Right. And it's brutal.
We were kind of talking about it before we started filming, like, your body at that point becomes so weak, but then over time it comes back to what it was. Mm-hmm. And it's incredible how you can be in one state and then in 1 month go back to normal.
Yeah. The body's ability to be resilient and to come back is pretty incredible. But also conversely, it's pretty wild how sick and ill you can get very quickly.
Sure.
And that's, what I experienced, especially the second time around. Like it was pretty rough.
With no warning signs usually, right? Like it kind of just, maybe you feel it in the sense of your energy.
Yeah.
Because for me, when I had my second open heart surgery, my parents were like, yeah, like he's weak.
Yeah.
He's not able to do as much. And then that's when they kind of said, oh, maybe let's do some tests. And then, we changed it. But other than that, like it's not like a little email that comes up and said, hey, you're gonna need a new valve in 2 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember at one of my appointments when I was in my older teenage years, that our pediatrician had said to me, well, at some point in your life, you may have to have open heart surgery. And I just thought at that time, I'm like, this is going to be when I'm like in my 50s, 60s, when I'm much older in my life. And, never did I think at that point that literally about, because I think it was around 17, 18 years old when I had that conversation, that 4 years later at 21, almost 22 years old, I'd be having my first open heart surgery under a not so good situation and circumstance.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Would you mind maybe sharing that circumstance?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I, and I'll never be able to figure out what it was, but I got some sort of bad bacteria, probably from a dental appointment that I didn't pre-medicate. That's the only thing that I could think of.
Sure.
And I got real sick. I got bacterial endocarditis, which is, for me, it was an abscess on the valve, and it had formed. It was about the size of a pea or so, and it just got me really, really sick. I lost a lot of weight pretty quickly.
Wow.
I got a lot of, black and blues in all my joints. Major fatigue. I mean, at the time I was 21, almost 22, at the time, you're supposed to have a ton of energy and this and that. And I had zero. Like, I had to take multiple naps per day. I went in and saw a few different doctors, and they couldn't piece it together. So ultimately, I ended up someplace. He knew exactly what was going on. And they rushed me down to Boston Medical Center when I had just turned 22. So they rushed me down to Boston Med. They did a couple of scans and realized that I had this abscess. They did some, IVs. They did everything to come at this to make the process as easy as I could, even though heart surgery is not easy in any way, but they wanted to, make it the process a little bit easier. And really, honestly, the IVs, antibiotics through the IVs and everything, it didn't work, or very little. So they did an emergency open heart surgery. I had my first open heart surgery. It was pretty brutal. I had, they can, give you all the books. At the time, it was books. I wasn't Googling. I wasn't looking at anything. And it was pretty rough. They want to get you out of the hospital pretty quickly because, you're around and exposed to so many germs and stuff. So I had the surgery. I immediately felt better. Like, I remember the day after, like, I immediately felt better, even though I was in rough shape. Like, they just opened up your chest.
And they want you standing within 48 hours, too.
Yeah.
Which is wild because you have all this, like, IV, all these machines, and then, like, get up and you're like, dude, like, I've been, like, sitting down forever. Like, but once you do get up, then they get you moving, and you're like, oh, wow, like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then that starts the recovery journey, I think, from there.
Absolutely. And I didn't respond well to the anesthesia, so I was really, really ill afterwards. Like, it took probably a good 24 hours until I felt a little bit better. But, got right up, and it was crazy, though, because not understanding all of this at the time, the docs came in and they gave me, two options. They said, we can put a tissue valve in you, or we can do a mechanical valve. And at the time I was super active, was, heavily active in martial arts and still playing, contact sports and this and that I chose, rather than go with a mechanical valve, knowing that I'd have to be on blood thinners, I chose the tissue valve. But it did come with a disclaimer, and they said, look, if you go with a tissue valve, you've got about a 10-year or so lifespan on it, and it's going to fail, and you're going to have to go through this again. I said, I'll take my chances. I did not want to go on blood thinners.
Sure.
And then, sure enough, 7 years later, I didn't get endocarditis the next time, but I went into heart failure, and that's when I got really, really serious. It was pretty rough. So it was pretty nuts.
Which is funny because about the whole taking pills thing. It's like, now I've taken it for 31 years, but when you're a kid and like, you're having to smash up pills because you don't want to take them whole, it's, I mean, now it seems normal to me, right? Yeah. But back then, like, it was a lot of learning on the fly. Like, it was like, let's just see what happens, And I mean, listen, for me, I think we can both say this. We're very lucky to live in the Northeast, where we have some of the best hospitals, best doctors. I mean, people fly from different countries to Boston to come and get the best medical care. So the fact that we're an hour away or even less, I mean, that's pretty incredible. I went to Children's, amazing team there. I can't I could probably say they saved my life multiple times, it's to not be dramatic, but they really did. And, it just shows that when you have a good team behind you, they do the front half of the work, but then it makes your second half of the work a little easier because a better surgery equals a better outcome and a better recovery, right? So
100%. I totally agree. And you're right. People come from all over the world. And I'll give you, for example, right before when I had mine down at Boston Med, there had been somebody from, I want to say it was Saudi Arabia, who had been in there who was having also heart surgery. And they had closed an entire wing down at that hospital for this individual. And they flew in because, Boston hospitals typically are the best of the best.
First class,
100%.
And also, I feel like it's a really great thing because, sometimes in the world we're in, it's hard to relate to other people. But I feel like when you're in the hospital with different kinds of people, it makes us all seem more like one, not so much in separate directions. So it kind of you kind of get a better understanding of hey, that person is from a different place, but they're just like me right now.
Absolutely.
We're going through the same exact thing, and it's all good. We're all here for the same outcome, and I think that's really great because sometimes you don't see that otherwise.
Yeah, you're right, and we're all being taken care of by the same people who want the absolute best outcome for each of us.
For sure, and and I feel especially for me, right, with having this health issue, you really have a different perspective on life. And, for me, I've never taken anything for granted in the sense of hey, I was born with this condition. I could be way worse.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, people don't get to live active lifestyles. Just due to whatever, sometimes our bodies don't like us,
Yeah.
So I don't take anything for granted these days because I'm healthy now, but I could have not been when I was younger and could have had a way worse life.
Yeah.
And and I feel having that condition, it really grounds you a little better.
Yeah.
Because when you're not sick, you don't know, so you don't think about it.
Right.
But when you are sick, it's something that's always in your mind, and you're okay.
Yeah.
It could be a lot worse.
Yep. Well, when you are sick and ill, you don't have your health. That's the only, that's the only problem you have. That is the one thing that, you wish that you.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess let's kind of go back a little bit.
Sure.
You mentioned sports.
Yeah.
Were you always a athletic kid, sports-driven kid?
Yeah. So I grew up playing basketball. That was my main sport. I grew up playing basketball. Did that all the way through high school. Played on the 1997 state champion Bishop Brady basketball team. I had the best experience. Played under amazing coaches with awesome teammates.
Was there somebody in your life that was into sports, or was it kind of just on your own? You got into it, or
just on my own and around, family. It was just, it was around us.
Sure.
So, I enjoyed it. It was a great outlet for me. I also got started really early into karate and martial arts, which I still do to this day, 32 years later. So it's always been a huge part.
Which I feel like martial arts, it's really, really great because, to what I've heard at least, it's a very active activity. And I feel like the discipline and the, everything that you learn from doing it, right? Because it's a very team-oriented thing as well.
It is team-oriented, but it is also very individual as well.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd say it's almost, in some respects, it's more individual than team.
Yep.
There's a team aspect to it when you go out and you compete.
Sure.
Because there are a number of factors that are around that, but for the most part, it's more individual. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it, but I also enjoyed, because I grew up around some really, really talented basketball players, and I enjoyed, being around them. And they're, to this day, they're still some of my best friends in the world. In fact, yesterday I just had lunch with Marshall Crane, who was, one of our top guys on the team. And, to this day, we still talk and hang out and send text messages and have breakfast. And
sure.
So it's cool. It's
well,
good.
I feel like it's like a sense of family a little bit too, right?
100%. Yeah.
Were there some things that came out of the martial arts and the karate that you don't think you would have learned otherwise in life that you learned because of it?
I'd say, you touched upon it a second ago with the discipline. 100% with the discipline, the mindset, and the focus. And that was one of the things, like on both times that I got sick, the first time when I got endocarditis and the second time when I went into heart failure, it gave me the ability to be really focused and disciplined on getting healthier, and also keeping a positive mindset.
Sure.
Because, it could have gone the other way, and it could have been, it was, I literally, the second time around, when I checked into the hospital, they said I probably had less than 24 hours to live.
Wow.
So they were like, if your wife hadn't taken you here, you probably within 24 hours would have gone to sleep and it would have been lights out.
Which, like, not a lot of people probably get that said to them, but isn't that wild how, like,
it's so
how
crazy.
You can be so close to just not being here anymore. Like,
Yeah.
Like I laugh, but it's not funny, but it's
Right.
just, I'm laughing because it's just wild of that thought of like, in 24 hours, if you would have waited, we wouldn't be sitting here talking today.
We wouldn't, 100%.
So it's just, that theory to me is just wild.
It is really crazy. And sometimes if I'm out on a long run or bike ride or whatever it might be, I'll think about that. And sometimes I'm like, man, like that is just so wild and crazy to think about that. Because I'm super stubborn. I am a very, very stubborn.
I feel like guys to a point are stubborn.
We are.
That's just how we are,
Yeah.
Let's be honest for a minute.
Totally. And my wife, she just, I couldn't walk upstairs. I was just in really, really rough shape the second time around. And, we were newly married too. We had only been married for about a year and a half.
Which obviously that has its own,
totally.
own things. Never mind adding this into it. It's adapting for everybody at that point for sure.
Totally. And she just said, "Let's get in the car. We're going." So we hopped in. She got me in the car and we drove down to Boston and called the ER on the way down and just said, "Hey, this is what we've got going on. We'll be at your hospital," which at the time. It was not Boston Med, and because my cardiac surgeon who did the first one, he was not there, so they recommended that we call Tufts Medical Center. At the time, it was New England Medical Center.
Yep.
They said, get in there. We called them. They said, meet us. It was kind of cool because it wasn't like a main room, our main area that we met them. It was like a private. So when we get to the hospital, they said, meet here, because I couldn't walk. And we got wheeled in, and they looked and they just said, "You're in rough shape." And of course, me being like super positive, I'm like, "So, like, is this like an outpatient type of thing? Can I go home?"
Right. And
they looked at me and they laughed. They're like, "If you go home, you're not coming back. You're gonna die." So.
Well, and I feel like when we're doing our day-to-day life, and I feel like we go through the motions a lot, right? Yeah. Like you kind of just, this is what I have to do today, and we just do it. Yeah. But I feel like when you're in that vulnerable position. Yeah. Of like, hey, I can't walk, I can't move. I feel like that like humbles you real quick.
Oh yeah.
Because like you're just so used to doing everything you want.
Yeah.
And then when you can't, you're like, okay, maybe let's tone it down a little bit and let's actually,
Yep.
Let's take this more seriously, I guess, right?
Yeah, I agree. All I wanted was normalcy at that point.
Sure.
Like, I'd love to. First of all, I'd love to be able to walk in. Because like when I went into heart failure, I gained a ton of fluid. I went from like 175, 180 pounds to well over like 215.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. So like, it was if I put on a pair of sweatpants, they looked like cycling pants on me.
No kidding.
It was really rough. And that's why when I went in there, they just looked at me. And the team down there was so unbelievably amazing. It's just, we go back to like the quality of care, right? They looked at my neck, they could see the pulses, and they were like, the head of the cardiovascular team, he ended up leaving the room, came back with like 6 or 7 other members of his team, and they were just like, "We don't know how you're here, but you're here for a reason, and we don't know if you're going to walk out of here. So we got to get all this fluid off you before we do anything."
Of course.
And they got all, they worked. We went from like from about 215, 220 pounds of fluid on me down to like 150, 160 pounds very quickly.
Wow.
So they got me to an operable state. They got me to the state where they could operate. And because if not, they're like, if you go into cardiac arrest right now, there's no way we're saving you.
Which, like, to be said that is kind of...
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
You know, because I've been in a situation where, like, doctors said, like, we've done everything we could, and I had to be transferred to another hospital.
Yeah.
And, like, I never thought I would...
Yeah.
Those words would come out.
Yeah. Oh,
you know, it's like... And, you know, at that point, you know, like, you're in the bed, you're there, and like, oh, my God, you know, like, what's going to happen?
Right.
And you know, to kind of go back for a minute, you know, with the martial arts and the karate and that kind of stuff, it's funny how sports will coincide with a health issue. Because it's kind of like what you said, like, you had that mindset of like, hey, let's stay determined, let's stay positive.
Yep.
Which I feel like is like really hard to do sometimes. Like, you know, like we wake up and, you know, we try to be as positive as we can. And sometimes, you know, hurdles and barricades make it not so easy. But like in those situations, the power of positivity, I feel like is so huge.
It is.
And, you know, hopefully, you know, you have a good support system around you that helps as well. But like, I feel like you really have to do a lot of the legwork. To like keep yourself positive. And I feel like, you know, maybe that's why I usually have a good positive attitude now in my life, because like, you know, I just adapted that from when I was younger to everything that happened, and that kind of carries over back into your adult life as well. You know,
the world needs more positivity.
It does.
That's for sure.
It does.
Needs more positive people. And just, I totally agree with you. Absolutely.
And, you know, I feel like sometimes we can get down on ourselves and, you know, kind of be too hard on ourselves a lot of the times too. And I feel like sometimes, you know, events like this kind of give you like a reality check and kind of bring things back into perspective. Yeah. Which, you know, I feel like we all need sometimes. Yeah. You know? Yeah. So to kind of touch upon the sports stuff, you did the basketball, you did the martial arts, karate. Was there anything else you were into as well?
Not really. I played a short stint of football, which, looking back on it now, I remember having a conversation with somebody from the cardio thoracic team, and they had told me, they're like, thank goodness you did not play, because it probably would have taken one direct hit to your chest. Sure. And, you know, could have been, we could have had an entirely different outcome. Sure. So I didn't, because I transferred high schools in my junior year. So then I was ineligible to play and all that stuff. So, which was fine. It was good, because then I could just focus on playing basketball and the involvement in the martial arts, and that was fine. So
into your adult life, what did fitness and what did healthiness mean to you? As far as like a day-to-day thing?
It was always an important part of what I was doing when I was younger, but not realizing that especially when I had the second open heart surgery, realizing when the team came to me after the surgery and kind of did a debrief, and they're like, because of how active and fit you were prior, it's probably the reason that you're here. You had a very, very strong heart. So now, you know, it is very, and to this day, it is very, that's why exercise and fitness and maintaining a certain level of fitness is extremely important.
Do you think if you wouldn't have had the heart stuff, that wouldn't have been as important to you? Or you think that would have always been important? Like, do you think the heart issues made that a greater thing for you to want to do?
Yeah, yes, exactly. Yes.
Right? Like, it kind of said that, okay, you know, a healthy mindset is a healthy heart, and a healthy life, you know, it kind of all goes hand in hand with everything.
Absolutely. There's a synergy between all of them, and yeah, thank goodness that I, you know, had maintained that, because, you know, I look back too, if I didn't have, you know, a level of fitness and I wasn't healthy, heart may not have been strong enough to, you know, live through that, you know, time when I was in heart failure and in a really, you know, tough situation. So,
you know, with all the knowledge that you've gotten the last couple of years, or, you know, forever, not just the last couple of years, but have you ever had like an interest in teaching others how to be healthy as well? or maybe sharing your mindset with people?
The business that I'm in, health and fitness. I'm a coach, a trainer, also teaching martial arts. So it all goes hand in hand, and have the ability to be able to give that knowledge to clients that I work with, and also to be able to lead by example.
Sure.
So that's a huge, piece to me, to be able to lead by example, because, I might have clients that come to me that need to either lose, 20 pounds or 30 pounds, or and I've had actually quite a few that have come to me that have heart issues, and they're like, I just need to know that I'm going to be okay, that I can, come and exercise and do this and do that, and that I'm going to have a good outcome. So it is very important that, as you know, we have a second and third chance at life, like literally, third.
The whole 9 lives thing is real. I'm telling you.
Yeah, we're on like 3, 4 now.
For sure. Like it's like, I didn't believe that until a couple of years ago. And now I'm like, all right, fine.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean you have to abuse it though, right?
No, you cannot. We don't. Right. Yeah, exactly. Sure. You're exactly right.
Well, and I feel like for you, that even teaches you even more, because obviously, everybody's bodies are different.
Yeah.
Nobody has the same thing.
Right.
So even, with what you knew, I'm sure training others and guiding others, you've learned 10 times more than what you would have ever learned as well.
Yeah, I learned so much I learned more from the clients than they maybe learned from me. I learned that, for every single client that comes in that I work with, they are not even close to their full potential. So to help guide them to getting closer to that potential that they may have, it's pretty cool. I mean, clients that come in that, maybe never had a desire to ever run a 5K, and now they run a 5K and they're like, oh, I think I can do more. And you inspire them to do more and give them the tools. And now they're running marathons or doing Ironmans or whatever.
Sure.
It's really neat how that happens.
And did you ever think that you'd be guiding other people and like helping other people? Like, was that ever?
Not from I don't think necessarily from a trainer coach perspective, but more from, because I always knew that martial arts would be a huge part of my life.
Sure.
So I always thought it would be more on the student teacher relationship, like from that angle.
Sure.
But to have, like over the years, I've been this now for 16 years, training and coaching clients. And, I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of clients and taught thousands of classes. And it's just been neat to see like what people are really, really capable of.
Sure. Like you can start from, let's say, 0 or 10 and go to 110 in a matter of weeks or months. And you're like, wow, like I had my hand in doing that. Like I was a part of that.
I had a client come to me about 7 or 8 years ago, and she had got some really devastating news from her physician. She needed to lose a lot of weight, or else there was going to be major problems. She ended up losing weight, and her goal was to lose 100. She ended up losing 115 plus.
Wow.
Unbelievable. It was amazing.
That's crazy.
I just think she's amazing. But then during this process and during this journey, she was also like, she got inspired because she saw other people doing things out of their comfort zones, like running races.
Sure.
So then she, goes and does a 5K, and then does a half, she did a sprint triathlon, and then it led to an Olympic distance. And now she has her own group down south.
Wow.
In the Carolinas that she leads with a group of multi-sport athletes. It is the coolest thing when I think about it, and all, because she got some tough news from her physician, and it led to her in the studio losing all that weight, and to see her life change because of it.
But what's wild is that she would have never gotten that news. She would have never accomplished what she did now.
Correct.
Right? Like, it motivates you to like, hey, like they say I can't do this. Well, I'm going to prove them wrong.
Absolutely.
And I think that's like the greatest thing about, the health and sports thing is that like, hey, listen, like just because you have a health issue or a health disability, does that mean you can't accomplish great things in physical sports or active sports or whatever? Like it's something that I think a lot of people need to probably hear more often.
Yeah. Well, you look at somebody like Chris Nakeek. He was the first individual with Down syndrome. I think it was 3 years ago, to complete an Ironman triathlon.
That's awesome.
And then he goes on and he does, the 6 stars. He becomes a 6-star finisher within a year.
Wow.
So he ran all the all the world major marathons. he's unbelievable, and what he's been able to do, and and transform lives around the world, and really just show that like anything is possible. It's pretty cool. It's pretty wild. And so to have the ability to be able to do that with athletes and clients that I work with, it's pretty special.
It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
It's something that will always be with you. If you ever go on to something else or whatever, like you'll always have those memories and those moments. And I think it's gratifying because, as human beings, we all want like a purpose and a role, right? And I feel like that's the greatest role you could ever be given, is making an impact on somebody's life.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And to go back to it, like kind of like what you said, it gives you accountability to keep doing what you want to do, and kind of like, hey, like maybe I'm not doing as much as I should be doing, but training this person is making me like, okay, let's get back into check, and let's keep on going. How has running made an impact on your life in the last couple of years?
So I hated running in high school. I hated it. The only running we did were it was wind sprints and basketball. That was it. And I had one coach. He was actually a football coach. When I was in high school, he was like, "Hey, let's go out for a 2-mile run." Well, in his mind, it was not 2 miles; it was actually 5. But the only way he could get me to agree
was to say 2 miles.
Was to say 2. So we ended up going out and we did 5 miles, and it was I hated it. And then he was like, "Oh, I'll try out for the track team." I tried out for spring track. I hated it. I was like, "I'm out."
So prior to that 5-mile run, did you ever run long distance running?
Never. I had never done. I don't think I'd ever done anything more than maybe a mile or 2. I'm pretty sure.
So he just threw you in there and said, "Let's see what see what can happen."
Absolutely. Yeah. We did that, and I think I suffered for days afterwards. I paid for it. It was pretty rough.
Your body was like, "Whoa, man! Like, this is not normal."
Yeah. And then I look back on it, like, in what I do now, it's such a huge part. Like just before, you and I meeting, like I went out and ran 5K. It's something that I do almost every day in my life now. It's such a huge part of my life that without it, there is, a vacancy, or there's a level of emptiness.
Well, because I read a little, like years ago, you should do at least 10,000 steps a day. Like, is that
ideally somewhere between 7,000 and 10,000 is a good.
Which is whether running, walking, whichever way you do it. I feel like as long as you're active. Better than being on the couch, obviously.
Geez, if we can get people out there walking every day, that's a big thing. It would be our health in this country would change drastically.
And I feel like people don't realize how minimal you can do to make a big impact as well. Yep. Like, you don't have to go run a 5K. You don't have to go run a half marathon. Yep. You don't have to do these big things, but just, 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, whatever it is.
Even if you segment it and you do 3 10-minute walks per day, I mean, your life is going to change. It's going to change. It's going to be
And better. I feel like with the Apple Watches and everything now, like, we kind of get a better, hey, like, this is how many steps I do a day. And it's like, okay, I did 5,000 today. Let's do 10,000 tomorrow,
Yeah.
So I feel like that's kind of helped, the technology aspect has helped.
Yeah.
Because, you kind of see what you've been doing, and you can kind of, all right, let's see if I can do more.
Yep. Yeah, we have access to so much technology and answers to training plans and this and that and everything, that it should be easy. But unfortunately for a lot of people, it's not, though. And so for us to be able to do this podcast and talk about health and fitness and heart and related, if it, resonates with one individual and it gets them off the couch, then we've done our job, man.
Absolutely. And, what's I guess your advice to somebody that is maybe in that rut of hey, I want to go into running or something in that avenue, but not sure how, or, doesn't think they can do it, Don't
overthink it. Just get out there and take that first step. Literally just get out there. I mean, all you got to do is throw a pair of shoes on. Go out there and just start walking, start running, start whatever. Just get out there and start. Take that first step. We overcomplicate it.
Which is kind of what happened with you with the 5-miler. You didn't know what you were doing, but you just did it, and
I had no idea what I was getting myself into.
And that's the purest example of just go do it.
That's it.
And if you don't want to do it again, then you don't do it. But I feel 9 out of 10 times afterwards, you're like, holy crap, I was able to do that.
Yeah.
let's see what else I can do. You know?
Yeah, right, exactly, 100%. And when you go out there and you do, it's crazy because, you know, it's like the rule of 2 in running, right? Like you can go out there, or rule of double. You go out there and you run a mile, okay, I can do 2. All right, if I can go out and run a 5K, probably do a 10K. And it just keeps snowballing.
Sure.
If I can do a 10K, I can do a half. If I can run a half, I can probably finish a marathon.
I do not think that way. Because like this past winter, or we're still in winter, but at the beginning of this year, I did like a 1 miler.
Yeah.
And like, you know, listen, like I stay active as much as I can, but I'm not a runner.
Yeah.
And it was funny because my girlfriend, you know, was like, hey, like, come do it with me. And I was like, oh, you know.
Yeah.
But then, you know, people find out and they're like, Darren, do it.
Yeah.
And like I did it, and like, yeah, it was 1 mile, right?
Right.
But like, I don't know, I felt pretty dang accomplished like doing it, because like I had never done a road race in my entire life.
Yep.
And then like I kind of just like did it, and like, I don't know, afterwards, like it was like, all right, cool. Like,
it's cool.
I don't want to do it again, but
yeah.
But cool, you know, like it, you know.
It doesn't have to be running. It doesn't have to be cycling or swimming. It's just, you know, going to the gym or whatever it might be. Go for a hike, something.
I feel like people are intimidated a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, even me going to the gym, like I'm intimidated.
Yeah.
You know, like you walk in and you see this fit person working out, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna go work out over there. You know.
Yeah.
So I feel like we all do it, no matter what your level is.
Yeah.
You know, that's just human nature, I guess. You know, to be intimidated or. You know, but once again, you know, when you successfully complete it, you're like, okay, maybe I was a little too hard on myself. You know? So I guess the point is, don't be so hard on yourself.
Absolutely.
That's, you know,
I agree. 100% agree.
Because we all do it, but, you know, if you can overcome that insecurity and that fear, I feel like you can get a lot out of it, for sure. So I guess let's talk about Boston Marathon this year. You've decided to take that adventure on.
Yes.
You know, what got you onto wanting to run it?
Yeah, so this will be my 7th Boston Marathon.
That's crazy.
That's
awesome, but crazy.
It is crazy. My first Boston Marathon experience was in 2015. It just by chance, I had a friend who she had said to me, she's like, you know, you've got a crazy wild heart story. You should reach out to Teddy's team and see if they have bibs. So I waited for the application process.
And what is that organization?
Teddy's team is run by Teddy Bruschi,
That's
former
awesome.
New England Patriot. You know, a legend in New England sports. He's an incredible guy. He had 2 strokes early on in his career. Yes.
Yeah, honestly, that's probably something people don't know.
Correct.
Probably.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And so he started Teddy's team, and this is the 20th anniversary actually this year of Teddy's team.
That's awesome.
So there's it makes it even that much more special being able to run this year.
Sure.
So Teddy's team, we raise awareness for stroke and heart disease, and you know, I was referred to by this friend to get over there and try it out, and I put my application in and got accepted in 2015. I ran from 2015 to 2020. So I ran those 6 years. 2020 was from home,
right?
Which was wild because, you know, of course we want to be on the legendary Boston Marathon course. But,
sure.
So what I did in 2020 was I, you know, crafted up a course that very much mirrored what the Boston Marathon course is.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I ran from Hopkinton, New Hampshire, and I finished at the State House.
Wow.
Which was really neat. And it was just, I had some friends that joined me. The night before, I got a message at the time from Chris Sununu when he was governor, and he reached out and said, hey, can I join you for a couple of miles? So he joined me for the last 2 miles. It was just awesome. It was such a fun experience, but that's the only virtual race I've ever done. It's the only one that I ever want to do. And that was it. So, but I felt that there was this also, I didn't have closure too, because 2020, I'd said, it's probably my last time running the Boston Marathon. And to run it from home, it just didn't seem right. Although it was an amazing experience given the circumstances, so then I waited for the last several years, and I just said, all right, 2025 is the year. So I put my application in 2024 in the fall, got accepted, and now we are 33 days out.
So at this point, you know, we're a month out. Mm-hmm. Is there anything special you're doing? Like, are you, like, you're obviously nervous?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like no matter how many you do, you still get nervous. But is there anything special you're doing now a month out, or is there anything that you have planned or?
Not so much special, but I will say that this training block has been probably the best training block that I've had, probably for any long distance race that I've ever done. Everything has just been really it's been on cue.
You're in the groove right now.
Absolutely. And in fact, this weekend, sometime between tomorrow, so by the time this episode comes out, I will have likely completed my last long run, which will be 20 miles.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm just debating whether I've got some complications and logistics on whether I go down to Boston to run it,
sure, or
if I do it from home. I'm probably going to likely do it from home, just so it doesn't interfere with some family stuff that we have coming up this weekend. But it's just getting that 20 miler, and then we go into taper mode, and then I'm running 2 half marathons. I'm running a half marathon on the 5th of April, and then I'm running a 5K on the 12th, and then that will be it.
So the last guest that I had on, I asked the same question, and I'll ask it again because I think it's kind of great to motivate people to do this kind of stuff. If somebody's watching this and they go, I want to run my first Boston Marathon, any tips? What would you say? I mean, I know we said just go out and do it, but I feel like with a marathon that's a little more intense. So, what are some tips that you would give or some advice that you've learned over the last 10 plus years that you would want to?
Yeah. So if it's specifically, if they're like, hey, specifically they want to run the Boston Marathon, you got to qualify to get into it,
right,
or you have to find a charity to get into.
To a fundraise, right?
To fundraise, yeah. And it's a big commitment. It's a very large commitment to do, time and financially and everything. But if it is a dream and you want to make it happen, you figure out how to make it happen. So sure, whether you have the ability to qualify, or whether it is you have the ability to network and fundraise and all of that. And of course, the charity's got to resonate with you and what you believe in and what you want. And I couldn't imagine running the Boston Marathon for any other charity other than Teddy's team. Obviously, it's near and dear to my heart.
Well, and that's what I was gonna kind of ask. It's kind of cool that you've kind of stuck with that charity this whole time and been so a part of it. Because I feel like sometimes you don't find that right organization that really fits you, but you seem to really have found that in.
I love it, and I love the Teddy's team family, the group. Obviously, Teddy is amazing, and it's and not just for the Boston Marathon, but I've had the ability to run some other races with them. I ran in Vegas. I've done a couple of other races like in Falmouth and others, and then this fall I'll be running Chicago with them. So it is something that's close to me. And when I put out a reach or an ask to friends to help support and whatnot, it's easy. It's a no-brainer for me to do that because it's near and dear to what I believe in and my story and history.
No, which that's pretty incredible because I feel like that also is a great motivation thing because people could look at you and be like, hey, this guy has had some issues in life health wise, but he's running, he's done the Boston Marathon multiple times.
Yeah.
So it's kind of and I say it all the time, if I can do it, you can do it.
Absolutely.
And I feel like it's just very simple, but it's very true.
Yep.
And I think that's really great. Well, this is incredible. Just everything, between us knowing each other and talking about this and everything you've accomplished. I guess finally, what's something let's say 5-10 years down the line, what's something you've done all this. Mm-hmm. What's something you would want to do that you haven't done that?
Well, a promise that I made to myself when I had especially on my second heart surgery, was that I make the biggest impact possible. So whatever that is, and
sure,
whatever the plan and path is supposed to be for that. So that for me, and I found that right now it's through multi-sport and through running, and making that impact and inspiring others. If it were to be a goal, if you're asking what's one huge goal?
Sure.
I wanted to do the Ironman. I've checked that off a couple of times. I'd say the next thing would either be becoming a 6-star finisher, so doing all the 6 of the world majors, now 7 with the addition of Sydney, or the other one is doing the 777, which is a marathon, 7 continents in 7 days.
Yes.
that is like my absolute ultimate dream, to get out there and to do that. And I hope to at some point be able to do that.
That's awesome.
Physically, because I want to be able to show that, you know, anything's possible. You can do this. And, you know, even having somebody who's been through heart failure and survived the worst of the worst, you can still get out there and make big impacts.
You've got that iron heart, you know. You know, it just shows that, like, once again, you can accomplish anything you want if you put your mind to it.
100%.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been great.
It's been awesome. I appreciate it.
So appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This is another episode of Behind the Scenes with Darren Roy. We'll talk to you guys later.